Welcome back to the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast, the show for people who are ready to break out of survival mode in order to build a truly thriving life. I'm Amanda Sollman, and along with Mark Jewell and the rest of my team here at Mark Jewell Speaking and Training, we break down common roadblocks that keep people stuck surviving and share ideas to help you thrive each and every day. Now, I don't know about you, but I am so excited that we are back into football season. Football means autumn, it means good food, it means cheering on your team. It is literally one of my favorite times of year. But I will tell you what, this week has been a rough go for my football teams. As I'm recording this, it is the morning of Tuesday, September 11th, and on Saturday night, or should I say Sunday morning, my Michigan State Spartans lost in a painful last-minute defeat to the Arizona State Sun Devils at about 2:30 in the morning Eastern time, which I stayed up to watch. And then last night, my hometown team, the Detroit Lions, lost at home to the New York Jets in spectacular fashion. So suffice it to say, it's been a rough week here for a Michigan State Spartan, I won't say Lions fan, but Lions supporter here as we go into the start of this week. And so I thought that tough weekend, beginning of the week that we just experienced here, was a good time to revisit some lessons that I think sports can really teach us about personal growth, personal development, continuing to grow yourself. There's a reason why we love movies like Rocky and one of my favorites, Remember the Titans. Sports are so analogous to what we all go through on a day-to-day basis, even though we often treat them as escape from life. I think they are a perfect analogy for us to learn a ton of things that we can apply to our own situations. And so what I wanted to do today is go through some of the biggest lessons that I continue to learn over and over again, no matter what sports I'm following. You know, right now, obviously, it's football season. But, other times of year, basketball, baseball, I think there's lots and lots of application. So let's dig into my list here. One of the first lessons that I think we all should take away from sports of any kind is the importance of having a good coach. Now, obviously, we're a little biased here at MJST since we are a coaching business. But there's a reason that coaching works, and I think sports can give us another lens to look at that. So we often say around here, coaching provides three things: feedback, perspective, and accountability. And I think on the sports field, that is no different than if you have a coach for business, like if you were working with us. So, for example, when my man, Mark D'Antonio, is coaching the Michigan State Spartans, he is bringing a perspective to the game that the players themselves may not see when they're in the midst of it. He and the rest of his coaching team can see what's happening from afar and can give some perspective on why something may or may not be working the way that the players want it to. That's no different than if you work with a coach here at MJST. Because we have a little bit of a disconnect from the situation that you're going through, we can point out some things that maybe you haven't seen when you're right in the midst of it. And so perspective is huge. And then based on that perspective, coaches can give some really good feedback. Now, sometimes that feedback is positive, right? So you've seen coaches on the sidelines after a player makes a good play, they pat them on the back, tell them they did a good job. They give that positive reinforcement to keep pushing good behaviors forward. On the flip side, when things aren't going so well, a coach can be there to give you some feedback, to give you more of a kick in the butt. I always joke, When a coach had a really good halftime talk because it probably shook the team out of a funk that they might have been in the first half of the game. So that feedback is imperative. They can give you ideas of how to change what's not working. They can just shake you out of your bad mindset to get you back on the right track. Feedback and perspective go hand in hand. The other thing that coaches do that I think we could all use more of is coaches give you a sense of accountability, right? They are somebody that you are beholden to other than yourself. Especially when you really respect your coach, you don't want to let them down. Think of coaches that you've had in your life. They hold you accountable to reaching your goals, to showing up to practice, to going out and playing in the games. Coaches are super important. And so I think one of the big lessons that I take away from watching sports of any kind is that coaches are super important because they bring you that feedback, that perspective, and that accountability. Now, I've shared some examples of where that shows up. Similarly, if you're working with a coach like what we do here at MJST, but think of other places. If you've got some health and fitness goals, signing yourself up to have a personal trainer or to go to a workout class where there's an actual instructor/coach at the front of the room telling you what to do. You can get a nutrition coach who can help you put together meal plans or can help you better understand how you should be fueling your body, right? If that's something that's of interest to you. Think even like things like spirituality. If you are someone who is religious, maybe you might even see, your pastor or your priest or whatever as a coach of sorts who can give you that feedback, that perspective, that accountability that maybe helps you deepen your faith or deepen your connection to something bigger than yourself. Coaches can show up in lots of different ways. So that's lesson number 1. Coaches are important. Another lesson that I have learned from sports that I think we all know intuitively but can keep coming back to is the importance of having a support network. So if you happen to watch the Lions-Jets game, which as I'm recording this was last night, but it was in the very first Monday night football game of the season, you will know that rookie quarterback for the New York Jets, Sam Darnold, threw a pick-6 interception in his very first play of NFL regular season. Not a great way to start off your career for anybody, right? Man, talk about a high-profile screw-up right off the bat. But here's this really kind of cool thing that happened is when Darnold walked off the field, he was immediately met by Jets backup quarterback, Josh McCown, who I'm not sure if I'm totally right on this, but I believe they said was actually the starting quarterback for the Jets last season. But he was on the sideline, and the first thing he did was come up to Sam Darnold and tell him basically, shake it off. You got more plays to come. You'll be fine. It happens to the best of us. Just keep moving forward. We all need to have those people in our life who can help talk us down when we're freaking out about mistakes we've made or failures we think we've experienced, right? Just like Josh McCown was there to tell Sam Darnold to shake it off, get back on the horse, keep playing. Don't let your head get you out of the game. We all need those people. Sometimes that person can be your coach. Sometimes it can be friends, peers, mentors. That's a big reason why here at MJST, we design our coaching groups to be small group coaching groups. Sometimes we get some questions as to why don't we do more one-on-one coaching? Because some people really like one-on-one. And what I always come back to is there is value in getting some of that perspective and feedback and support from someone else other than your coach. There can be value in having people who are also in the trenches with you, telling you that you've got this, giving you ideas on how to overcome your struggle, helping you break out of the funk that you might find yourself in. So whoever that is for you, try to really build those relationships for each other, right? That's the other cool thing about a support network is it becomes mutually beneficial. They help you and you help them when those relationships are really, really working. That experience for Sam Darnold, though, throwing that pick six, brings me to my next lesson. And this is one I feel like I relearn every single season of football. And that is that you have got to focus on the next play in front of you. Now, it always amazes me when you see, especially at the quarterback position. I think there are other positions too where people make mistakes and whatnot, but especially at the quarterback position because there's so much pressure on that person and there's so high of expectations on that person to perform that every time somebody makes a mistake, they throw an interception, they get sacked, whatever, that I often feel bad, right? Maybe not as bad if they're playing my team, but I always look at them and go, man, that really sucks. You just screwed up epically. And now you've got to figure out how to go back out there with an optimistic, positive attitude and keeping your head clear so you can keep playing the game, right? So when Sam Darnold threw that interception on the very, very first play of the game, not to mention the very, very first play of his regular season professional career, it can be easy to just let that screw up the entire rest of the game. It can be easy to beat yourself up and then not be able to make things happen from there on out. But what really good quarterbacks do, and I think the lesson we can all learn, is that they figure out how to focus on the next play in front of them. Right? They can't go back and make that interception unhappen. They can't go back and not get sacked, right? They can't fix what's already happened, but what they do have control of is the next play in front of them. And as most of us know, right, any game is just one play at a time. We're constantly figuring out what does and doesn't work. In football, interceptions don't work. So we got to focus on the next play and figure out what might be a better play to not get the ball intercepted or whatnot. And so in real life, though, I think we forget this lesson to focus on the next play. Instead, we often make mistakes and then we just spin our wheels reliving those mistakes over and over and over again. I can tell you I am as guilty of this as the next person. Something happens and I spend the next, few hours or a few days replaying that situation in my head, either blaming somebody else for what I feel like they should have done differently or beating myself up for what I should have done differently. When at the end of the day, I cannot change what happened. So I have to remember to focus on the next play in front of me. What is the action I can control? What can I do next? When we talk to a lot of our clients, as we've mentioned before, a lot of them are in sales. Right. And so you can see some direct applications here where you make a sales call in the morning that doesn't go well. And I bet most of us in that role have had a time or two where we've let it affect the rest of our day, right? Because it was such an epic failure or we were so excited and then fell flat on our face. When instead, what we actually have control of is getting back in our vehicle and going and talking to the next person. Or going to an event and meeting some new people, or planning something where, maybe a sales program where we can create some incentives for people to sign up with us. Whatever it is, we have control over the next play in front of us. We can't control the plays that have already happened, right? Those are now done, over with, out of our control, and stewing on them doesn't do us any good. So instead, we should take lessons from really good quarterbacks and focus on the next play, let the past go, and move forward with what's in our control in the future. That being said, what is the next play? What can you do? keeping going back to this example of Sam Darnold, I'm telling you, as I was watching the game last night, I was like, man, this kid just made an epic mistake, but it is going to make for a great story for the rest of it, for the rest of that game, as they ended up beating the Lions by something like 30 points, even though he threw that interception in the first play. But also, like, for the rest of his career, can you imagine? Who knows? But can you imagine if he becomes just this really awesome NFL quarterback and he gets to tell the story? Yeah, my career started off with a pick six interception in my very first play. Like, talk about an awesome story. But in any case, back to where we were going. So the only thing you can do when you make those mistakes, right, is focus on the next play in front of you. And sometimes that means you've got to adjust your plan. So in Sam Darnold's case, so he threw the ball in that first play, had an interception. So at least the next two plays, maybe the next 2 or 3 plays, they did some running plays. Instead of throwing the ball, he passed it off to whoever and move forward with some running plays in an attempt just to help him, one, build his confidence back up, right? Because he was definitely shaken. You could see that he was thrown off a little bit. So part of it was building up some confidence, but also clearly throwing the ball in that first play did not work. So you might as well try something different for a few plays. And so they decided to run the ball. This is something I also think that we could stand to pay more attention to. You know, they say, right, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Same thing goes for when we make mistakes or screw up or find that maybe we didn't even make a mistake or screw up. We just discovered that the original play that we made wasn't the right one. It didn't get us the results we made, or it didn't get us the results we wanted. So the next question becomes, how can we change up our plan, right? So if I'm making all of my sales calls in the afternoon and I am not catching anybody, maybe I try making some in the mornings. Maybe I earmark like a Saturday and I see if I can catch some people on a Saturday. Maybe I go to an industry meeting where I think people might be at, right? If what I've been doing is not working, it's time to try something different. Now, what I see a lot of people do, especially young people, is what they're doing isn't working, but their first gut reaction is to say, I don't know why it's working and I don't know what to do differently. That's one of those places where, to go back to the earlier lessons, I think we can really tap into our coaches and our support network, because maybe there's somebody there who could provide some new ideas. Also, maybe it's time to challenge ourselves to think outside what we believe is possible, right? Sometimes we close ourselves off to solutions just because from the very get-go we say, oh, that'll never work. Sometimes taking a different play is trying the crazy thing. If I think back into recent Michigan State Spartan football history, everybody talks about the famous Little Giants fake field goal against Notre Dame. This was back when I was in college. Mark D'Antonio, early in his career at MSU, tried a crazy thing and it paid off. Now, if he had said, oh no, faking a field goal will never work, like, imagine the great story that we never would have had. But that's what happens when we don't close ourselves off to possibility, when we say what we've been doing isn't working, and so let's try something different. And yep, that something different might be crazy, but it just might work. The last two things that I often like learning from sports contexts is all about what happens before you ever step out on the field. And that is practice, visualization, and study. Now, there are no professional or even collegiate athletes who just show up on game day and play without having practice first. Right? Practice is really important, not only to learn the plays, but also to feel what it's going to somewhat be like when you're doing it for real. So consider where practice could be more, where you could use more practice in the future. So maybe you are a salesperson and you've got to practice what those conversations might look like, or you've got to practice putting together some draft proposals that you can get feedback on. Maybe you are in a different type of role, and let's say you're planning an event. Maybe you need to practice on some smaller scale events before you take the reins on something really big. There's all sorts of ways that practice shows up for people, but I think it's really important to remember that we can't show up on game day and really rock it out without putting in the practice first. And sometimes, honestly, that practice looks like a bunch of mini smaller games or smaller stakes games. So it's going out and talking to people over and over and over again. So when you finally get the meeting with the big prospect, you have done so many reps with lower stakes prospects that you're ready for the big one because you know what you're doing. Putting in the reps is the only way to get good. So if you feel as though you're not performing on game day, it might be because you haven't taken enough reps in practice. You haven't taken enough hits. And so you're not actually ready to play at the level of the rest of the people around you. The other thing that I think is part of practice, but it almost happens, completely off the field. And I think about visualization and studying. So especially when it comes to quarterbacks, I think they do some work like visualizing what that play is going to look like, visualizing where their receivers are going to be, visualizing where the defense might move, right? They're picturing all of that and thinking through how would I adjust if all of these dynamics were to come to fruition. They also spend time studying their plays, studying the playbook, studying, what the other team historically does, studying what their team did, right? There's always a debrief session after the game to say what went well, what didn't go well. That is all part of study. And where I think this really relates to all of us is in kind of the professional growth, but also personal growth realms, is the importance of studying our craft, both specific to the job we do, but also just studying what it takes to be a better version of ourselves. So when it comes to your profession, studying what does it take to be a great salesperson? What does it take to be a great marketer? What does it take to be a great leader? Reading books, listening to podcasts, watching videos, and really just learning more about your craft from the people who are really good at it. But the other thing too, specific to more personal growth, is taking that time to invest in yourself and learning and growing regularly. There is a reason why taking in positive content or personal growth content is something we recommend people do every single day. With our Thrive with 5 habit tracker, that's some of the points you get is for taking in some positive content, because studying your craft, studying what it takes to be great, we should all be constant learners, and that is a key part of it. So like I said, I love when football season comes back because it is a great reminder of so many good things, but especially the personal and professional growth lessons we can learn from sports, but that apply to all different types of situations. Getting a coach, building a support system, always focusing on the next play, adjusting your approach when what you've been doing isn't working, practicing, visualizing, and studying. You do not have to be a collegiate or a professional athlete to do those things. You're a professional in your own right. And so it's time to put those lessons to good use. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. If you like what you heard, make sure to jump over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. We appreciate the feedback, and it helps other people find the show. On that same note, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend. As always, if you're looking for more resources to go from surviving to thriving, check out our website at www.markjeweltraining.com. That's Jewel with 2 L's. And you can find us under Mark Jewel Speaking and Training on all the major social networks. Remember, survival is dead. It's your time to thrive today. See you next week.